Okay, let's all welcome Heidi Ganal and Danny Moore for Governor and Lieutenant Governor.
This is a tight fit. I'm glad we all like each other.
Absolutely. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we have 3 Jeffco students here with us tonight, Oliver, Grace, and Nora, who are going to lead us in that. Welcome. I am Lindsay Datko, the founder of Jeffco Kids First. And Beth Parker, my co-leader, is here and will be keeping time for us tonight. This afternoon, we will hear from Heidi and Danny, who are running to be our governor and lieutenant governor. Over the past couple of years, we have intimately come to understand the immense impact the governor of Colorado has on our children. 6 Metro District advocates and I met with our current Colorado governor in December 2020. We told him about the devastating emotional, social, academic, and physical state of our children. The governor assured us that plenty of relief money would be coming to our district, thanked us, and moved on to his next meeting. Soon after that, I'll never forget the image of the governor standing in front of news cameras. He stated that children were safest in their schools and all should prioritize opening up our schools. My children looked at me wide-eyed as I shrieked in relief. And then nothing happened. And we waited. And we hoped. And 2021 rolled around. Surely we would see our children return to normalcy, but we didn't. They were just empty statements and false hope, justified and hidden by 2 words, local control. We weren't about to sit back and let the governor hide behind local authority, so we removed it, quite literally. And that's when we saw changes. It took us a year of hard work and research. Parents often felt alone during this battle, but Heidi Ganal was there for us. Today, our children have moved from pandemic restrictions to pandemic restriction recovery. This work to heal our kids is as important as the fight to end the restrictions. We know Children's Hospital declared a state of emergency because there were not enough beds to handle the immense need for inpatient treatment for children experiencing severe emotional distress. We know from the recent statewide academic assessment scores that our children suffered massive learning losses from which they are not recovering. Our children's pandemic experience was once the top hourly news story. That story has since faded, and our children continue to live the residual effects. It's our job to keep their story at the surface, which is why I am so honored to welcome you to this town hall with Heidi Ganal and Danny Moore, 2 incredible education warriors who are fighting to keep our children's story alive. Their recovery is their top priority. We will be asking Heidi and Danny a series of questions about the education system. They will take turns answering first and have 2 minutes each. But first, let's have each of them introduce themselves and share their connections to education. Heidi, you'll go first, and then followed by Danny.
Thanks, Lindsay. Mic okay? Okay. Thanks, everybody, for being here. And Lindsay and Beth, you have been warriors for our children. And I am so honored and blessed to call you friends and fellow warriors in this cause for our kids. And John and Maria and so many other folks in this room who have fought so hard for our children, Marilee. Our kids are in crisis right now. The media doesn't want to talk about it. Twitter doesn't want to talk about it. The governor doesn't want to talk about it. But our kids are killing themselves. They're getting addicted to drugs. They are addicted to screens. They're lacking community. They're in isolation, Mickey. It's tragic. And if we don't wake up and do something, and I know I'm preaching to the choir in this room, but those of you that are watching online, if we don't wake up and realize that this is a moment in time where we have to stand up as parents, we have to stand up now. We have 36 days to stand up and say we will not tolerate the leadership that is in place right now that is ignoring our children and saying everything is fine, there's nothing to see here. We have the second highest fentanyl death rate in the country. I mean, you know the stats. I've gone over and over in them. Our kids are hurting. As parents, we're struggling. We're trying to figure out how to get our children back on track. As you know, I'm a mom of 4. I have twins that are 10, Jack and Jenna. I have a 13-year-old Holly, and I have 27-year-old Tori, who's in the back. And I've been on the front lines with these guys figuring out what the heck do we do with our kids? How do we get them through this? How do we help them be healthy again and have a good life ahead? How do we get our state back on track and fix all these horrible problems we're facing? Well, it starts with making a different choice on the ballot and voting differently and holding Jared Polis and the Democrats, and my friends that are Democrats, I believe you should too, hold them accountable for the decisions they're making and vote differently. Give us a chance. Give us a chance to do things differently, and we will. Thank you.
Isn't she wonderful? I can tell you how important education is. You know, when I graduated from high school, my state was 49 out of 50 in education. That's horrible. And I struggled as I went into the Navy and then went into school. And I tell the story that when I started college, my education was so bad that I spent the first year just taking remedial classes, no credits, so that I could get up to the point where I could earn an education. So I know the value of an education. Education is a great equalizer. What it does, it takes people out of poverty and it gives them hope and opportunity. And there's a study out there by the AAI fellow that basically says there are 3 things that a kid can do to stay out of poverty. 97% of the kids who just do these 3 things will stay out of poverty. Number 1, graduate from high school. Number 2, get a full-time job. And then number 3, stay out of having a baby before wedlock. Just those 3 things. And then out of that 97%, 86% of those kids end up in the upper and middle class. So you notice I didn't say anything about college. Just getting out of high school, that's how critical it is. So when we don't teach our kids to read, what happens is we're dooming them to a life to being a victim. And that's unsettling, and that's something we cannot tolerate. So if for no other reason, we have to hold Jared Polis accountable for what has happened in the last 4 years. Because there was a time where 60% of our kids could read, and now 60% of our kids cannot read at grade level, and that's shameful. And that's why Heidi Ganal and I are in this race. It's too important. It's way too important. So I'm Danny Moore, and I hope to be your next Lieutenant Governor.
I want to start with academic achievement. Recently announced state assessment results show that student achievement is not even back to 2019 levels. For example, only 40.7% of third graders met or exceeded expectations on their 2022 English Language Arts assessment, up from 39.1% last year, but still down from 41.3% in 2019. And student achievement gaps continue. On CMAS language arts assessments in 2022, white students met and exceeded expectations from about 24 to about 30 percentage points higher than black students and 27 to about 32 percentage points higher than Hispanic groups. Heidi, as governor, what will you do to ensure more Colorado students are learning and achievement gaps disappear because our minority students are learning as well?
Thanks, Lindsay. Well, I've been on the education front for a long time, whether it was starting charter schools. I helped start 3 charter schools, classical education schools, Golden View Classical Academy, and Ascent Classical. And I got pretty involved in my kids' education early on. We were at Superior Elementary. Hi, Brad and Julia and Barbara. We were there together and saw firsthand a lot of this stuff that's happening now in our schools 4 or 5 years ago, before it was really a thing. And so as I've been on the front lines of education during that and as a regent, the most important thing I've realized we can do is give power back to parents. Choice, transparency, and competition. Really the only way we get true competition in our schools to hold their feet to the fire to actually do what we want them to do, and that's read, write, math, and also keep them safe while they're learning, is to give parents the ability to walk out with their kids. And that means having the funding follow the families, which we'll talk more about later, but we have to make that decision to do that. That's the only way we're going to change things. And then provide transparency to parents so that you can actually see what our kids are learning and make the decision for yourself if they're learning what they need to learn. And that bill was turned down by the Democrats and Jared Polis in this last legislative session. It was a party line vote. It went to a vote. Do you want to provide transparency to parents? And it was no. So that's got to change too. So choice, transparency, and competition is, in my estimation, how we're going to fix this.
And Danny, what thoughts would you add?
So anyone who has more than 2 kids know there's nothing common about them, right? They know they learn differently, they act differently, and we have to educate our kids in that manner. We have to look to see what's the best way that kid learn. Some learn by doing, some learn by seeing. We've adopted a process that basically teaches all of our kids the same. And those who are capable of learning that way, they succeed. And those who are not, they're left behind. We're leaving too many of our kids behind. So we need a system that has all of the above. Heidi is famous for saying that. We need an all of above system. Some small classrooms, some pods, some private classrooms, some public classrooms. There's a role for public education, but it has to be done in a way that serves the kid. And I like to say that, our children don't have a union. We are their unions. We have to represent them in a way that makes sure they learn. Because if you go back to the mid-90s in the state, one of the things you realize our kids were learning. So what was different then than it is today? Because we've passed legislation that favors administration over education, and that needs to change.
Now let's move to K-12 education spending. The state budget allocates $7.2 billion for K-12 education, an 11.7% increase from last year, and that is on top of hundreds of millions of federal dollars still being spent to reduce the effects of COVID closures. Including local property tax revenue, total base spending for K-12 classrooms is estimated to be $8.4 billion, a 5.4% increase from last year. An average per pupil spending would be $9,560, $545 more than last year, a 6% increase. Valerie, a Jeffco Kids parent, is here to ask our next question.
Hi, my name's Valerie Leal, and I'm one of those Democrats that's voting differently for the first time. You might ask why. I've been following Heidi and got connected through Jeffco Kids First with her. Number one, their priority is children. She's the only one I've seen that actually seems to care. She listens to parents, and she's trying to hold government accountable for how they do their spending. So my question is around spending. With declining enrollment in public schools and increasing funding, what would you change about our tax dollars and how they are allocated to school districts and how school districts spend the dollars they receive?
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming and being open to listening to other ideas and not getting stuck in the party discussions, because this really isn't about party, it's about our kids. And we all want what's best for our kids. And as far as how the funding goes, I would like the funding to follow the actual student, so that if a student wants to go to a different district, if they want to go to a charter school or a private school, a religious school, if you want to homeschool, do a micro school, that you have access to those dollars so that you can do what's best for your child. Now, when they say we're taking the dollars out of the public system, well, if it follows the student, if a student or a family decides to leave the system, they don't have to educate the student anymore. So that's one less student. They don't need that money to invest in that student. Perhaps we'll have smaller classes then, because one of the keys for a lot of kids is smaller classrooms. One of my children has dyslexia, the other has dysgraphia, and they really, really struggled in the public school systems with 30 kids in a class. They couldn't get the attention they need. And I fought for them to get IEPs up in Boulder Valley School District. And God bless, the teachers and the faculty were amazing. They tried to help, but all they could do was 30 minutes of help a week. And it just didn't move the needle. And I thought, wow, if I'm a parent with this many resources and I'm a regent and I know how this works and I can't get my kids the help they need, how do we help a single mom in downtown Denver working 3 jobs that can barely figure out how to put meals on the table or gas in the car to make a difference for her kids? Because we do have school choice in Colorado if you can afford to bring your kid out of their school. But if you can't afford it, you don't have choice. And the other thing that's really important about this is transportation. We've got to make sure the transportation dollars allow for the districts to move kids around in a unique or innovative way too, which they turned down at the Capitol over the last couple sessions as well. So having the funding follow the student, I think, is the most impactful thing we can do. And then locally, if local districts or school boards want to provide more money through mill levy overrides, et cetera, that's up to them. I honor that. But from a governor's perspective, I think the most important thing we can do is education savings accounts, tax credits, and getting the dollars directly to the families so they can make the best decisions for their children.
Yeah. So you can see why I joined this ticket, right? She is just powerful, and she's passionate about this. And I can tell you, I was at a Common Sense Institute event, and they talked about school funding, and I was shocked. I didn't know that 22,000 kids had left the public school system. I didn't know that they were predicting 66,000 more kids are going to leave the public school system. Now, here's the trickle-down effect of that. What happens is that communities dry up. There's no high school football game to go to. There's no band to go to. There's no theater to go to. Communities dry up. Kids lose that attachment to a community. So the crisis is real. They're closing down schools in Jefferson County. They're closing down schools in Denver County. The other thing that shocked me is when I realized that there's been a 30% increase in funding for students, but there's been a 70+% increase in funding for administrators. Think about that. Our teachers, 1/5 of our teachers can't afford homes in the communities that they serve. Our teachers are not being compensated. We have great teachers. But we're funding the wrong side of education. We need to draw down some of the administration, support our teachers, and create an environment where they want to teach our kids. That's where the funding should go, and that's what Heidi's talking about, making sure that the kids are funded, the families are funded, and not individual administration. And that's why I'm on this ticket, because if anybody can get it done, Heidi Ganal can get it done. Yeah.
Hey, Lindsay, can I just add one fact, too? We did some research with a pretty well-known education reform organization here in Colorado, and the average classroom gets $250,000 in funding, and only $50,000 of that goes to the teacher. So that's what we mean when we move the money back into the classroom with the teacher and away from the administration. And that's happening in higher ed, too. At CU, we have all these new administrators. The administrative bloat is huge. Well, that's paid for by tuition dollars. And it's moving money out of the classroom, away from the teachers, and into administrative bloat.
Thank you. I want to ask a question now about a sensitive topic, school safety. And for this question, please focus on the physical safety of our children in our schools. I know Heidi was asked in 2015 to sit on then Governor Hickenlooper's School Safety Committee. After a year of work on that committee and lots of effort, as the committee was ready to make recommendations, they were told their ideas were not needed. 5th grade Oliver will ask this question.
My dad used to be a member of the School Safety Committee for Jefferson County Schools, where he and other parents would learn and make the recommendations about how to keep kids safe in school. But they stopped meeting during the pandemic. Now my mom tells me that there is a group in Arvada that wants my school district to remove school resource officers, and that other school districts have already removed them. I feel much safer when I see my school resource officers on the first day of school or during safety drills. I like knowing they are nearby to help if there is an emergency. As governor, what will you do to make sure that our schools stay safe for us and that other parents are involved in decisions about keeping us safe?
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you. You did amazing. You know, nothing is more important than keeping you guys safe. I worry every day. My kids go to school, when they go to the mall, when we go to a restaurant. It's really dangerous right now. In fact, I've been saying Colorado is one of the most dangerous places in the country to be a kid. And don't worry, we're going to fix it. That we can fix this. But we've got to have leaders who will be strong and have a spine and recognize that we need to keep our kids safe at school more than any place else in Colorado. And the school resource officers that I know, that I've met, we had tons of interviews on that committee, and I've been out in the community, they have such a passion for our children. They want to build relationships. They want to know what's going on in your lives. They want to build friendships, right? They want to know how they can help you. They're not just some police officers standing at the door. They're a member of the school community. And we don't have very many across Colorado. We need more school resource officers. We need ex-military, ex-law enforcement to be able to volunteer to do it. Grandpas be able to volunteer to do it. Grandmas too. We need to partner with parents to address this huge worry that all of us have about our kids going to school every day. And so I ran a franchise company, and we would do assessments on our franchises, on our locations, to keep the dogs safe, a little bit different. And we had a very simple tool that we would use. It would take a couple days of visiting the camp. And we knew exactly the same questions were being asked of all the camps across the country. It was very consistent. And we knew if they were above or below or where there were issues, it wasn't punitive. It was like, here's some gaps you need to look at. Here's some things we need to do better. There was a set of best practices that they were expected to meet. And so when I was on the school safety committee, I created School Safety 360, a pilot program to do just that for schools, so that we could have an advisory committee of really intelligent, great people in school safety, and that they would create this assessment tool. We tried it at a couple charter schools, and they loved it, and they thought it was awesome. It helped them figure out where the gaps were with these experts. And then we gave them a blue ribbon, an award through Moms Fight Back, and they loved it. They touted it. Why can't we do that with all the schools? We went all over the state and presented it to districts, big and small. No one would take us up on it. We said, we'll cover the cost. No one would take us up on it. We don't need outsiders coming into the school system. I talked to executives, all the big leading organizations in Colorado, to see if we could get it done. No one would take us up on it. As governor, I will make sure it happens. And we'll try all kinds of things, not just my idea, but lots of ideas. I know there are amazing people working in school safety. Colorado, unfortunately, has had such a horrible track record on this. We should be the leader in figuring out how to make schools safe again. And we will be under a Ganal governorship, I promise you that.
So this is kind of personal to me. You know, when we had the shooting at Arapahoe High, one of the things that I did, because the only thing I could do was see if we can build technology to help. So we went out and we talked to school counselors, and in most cases there was, 2 or 3 school counselors for 5,000 kids, and they said we can't identify all the kids who are having crisis. And so the tools we proposed to build were tools that allow those counselors to be notified, because you know who knows it, who's in crisis? The kids do. They all do. We couldn't get that program off the ground because they were concerned about things like privacy, but I can tell you, one of the things I'll tell you is this: we guard everything we value. We put guards around our money, we put guards around our cities, we put guards around our bases. Why aren't we guarding our kids? What's more valuable than that? And it breaks my heart that they want us to go into the schools with guns after our kids have been shot and killed, but they don't want us to have guns to keep our kids from being shot and killed. It's not logical to me for us to continue to see this happen and not do anything about it. We have to do something different. Our kids are in crisis. We need to help them with mental health care. We need to help them to cope with the things that are in their lives. We have to. But at the same time, we have to protect our future. Because for me, it's no longer acceptable that we put politics over the safety of our kids. It's time for a change. And again, this is the reason why I'm running with Heidi Ganal, because she's determined. She's determined to make a change. And that's what we need to do. We need to be realistic about the dangers of our kids. And we need to take the steps that we need to make sure that we can protect them in their schools.
John Castillo, who tragically lost his son Kendrick in the STEM school. John Castillo, that's all right, who tragically lost his son Kendrick in the STEM school Highlands Ranch shooting, is here to share a few words before we discuss this next topic.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here tonight. I'm John Castillo. My wife, Maria, is there in the audience with me. We're the parents of Kendrick Ray Castillo, who is the hero at the STEM school shooting, who tragically lost his life while he was protecting his classmates, 2019 on May 7th. You know, after the shooting, we met with Governor Polis, and we had a roundtable discussion about things that we would like to see and change. And one of them was using the United States Patriot Act to rename school shootings to an act of domestic terror so that they can be tried in a federal court. That fell on deaf ears and nothing ever came out of it to this day. And the reason for that is we would be able to try these things in a federal court, and the juvenile aspect of it, the penalties would be greater. What we're seeing right now is a deteriorating judicial process for juveniles and adults. And mass shootings, acts of domestic terror, school shootings, there's no consequences for the action. That's why you're seeing, the activity that we see month over month, the calls of swatting to get SWAT officers out to our schools like we saw just a couple of weeks ago. So we advocate for that, but I have to tell you, right after our shooting, we would get phone calls from people who wanted to meet us and talk to us. And one of those individuals was Heidi. And it was before she had any aspirations of being governor. She was just a kind person. I didn't even know that she was a regent at CU. We met for coffee and we talked, and she shared her loss of her husband in a plane crash, and we cried together, and I felt her compassion and love. And when I found out later that she was going to run for governor, Marie and I had to support her. Her values align with what we want to see for safe schools. We've seen it here in Jefferson County with Columbine and STEM and Arapahoe, and up in the mountains with the Keys family, Emily Keys losing her life. Colorado has had just a horrible record of these things happening. And afterwards, there's a lot of people coming out, and there's a lot of sorrow and a lot of prayers, but we really need action. We need it under the dome. We need to make the changes that are going to be there to keep our kids and staff safe. We talk about our teachers and our educators. We have a shortage right now. We can't retain them. And people always equate it to just pay. I've had so many of them tell me that they're afraid. They're afraid of students. The teacher that was in the classroom with Kendrick has returned to teaching small kids because she's afraid of older kids, that these things are going to happen. So we're losing good people by not doing the right thing. So we get behind that. And our advocacy really aligns with what Heidi's talking about. Part of it is mentorship in early education and in our schools. It's vocational opportunities. When we talk about mental health and the rates of suicide, we have to wonder why those things happen. If as a teenager you're falling flat and you don't see opportunities in your life, your grades might not be good enough, or your education that you're receiving, if you're not reading or doing math at grade level, you're not going to make it in college. You start to see opportunities get away from you. And then your life becomes less valuable. We can change that. We can remove self-harm from our kids. We can minimize the fentanyl overdoses where kids are dying at their desk or in the bathrooms of our schools. Or thinking, you know what, if I can't kill myself, I'll just let everybody else feel my pain. which was a direct statement from one of the shooters. We want everybody to feel our pain. Well, you know what? My wife and I, they succeeded. We have to make changes. We have to support kids. We have to be mentors. We have to be leaders. We have fatherless homes, not because the father's absent, but because he's just providing financially and not spending time with kids. We have to look at these things from a different scope, a different perspective. We have to strengthen our families. Fathers have to be there. There was a quote I heard that just rocked me a couple of weeks ago. Most men will be missed rather than remembered. Let that sink in. We raise kids and we provide for them, give them food. We send them Venmo for money or Uber to get them from here to there. But there's no physical love and connection. So, these are things that we can work on. Heidi has a good plan for bringing safety and security back to our schools. Just as Danny had mentioned, there's nothing wrong with, it's $80,000 a year for an SRO in a school, which we fully support. But we have veterans, we have trained people. There's companies like Faster who train and will allow people to be in the school so you don't have a situation like Uvalde. They're there. Let's at least give it a chance and open our minds and our heart to protect our kids. And I talked to you today, we have no other children. Kendrick was our only child. So we do these things for your kids. And it affects, it's bipartisan. Those shooters never went in and picked out people by their religious belief, by their political affiliation. They wanted to murder everybody. So thank you, and please support Heidi.
Thank you. Related to safety of our children, let's talk about fentanyl. In 2019, the legislature passed and the governor signed a bill to decriminalize fentanyl by changing possession of 4 grams or less from a felony to a misdemeanor. In 2020, 540 people died from an overdose in Colorado. Last year, more than 900 Coloradans died from an overdose, and according to state health department data, including 4 children under the age of 1 and 35 people between the ages of 10 and 18. Reacting, the legislature addressed this in 2022, but still left possession of fentanyl of 1 gram and under, a misdemeanor. Mickey, if you'll come up. A determined Jeffco Kids First mom lost her 16-year-old daughter, Hannah, during the pandemic to fentanyl poisoning. And she's here to honor her daughter and ask our next question.
Hi, everybody. December 7th, 2021, I lost Hannah when she took what she thought to be a Xanax she had received the prior night. My daughter, she was just an amazing kid. She would never let a child sit alone at school. She would always bring him over to whatever group that she would be hanging around with at the time. Sorry. Hannah's teachers loved her. She would always help out other kids that may have been struggling. I mean, she would just jump up right away. Even though her teachers, when I go to conferences, they'd be like, she talks a little too much. Her laughter and tenacity is unforgettable. Heidi, what would you like to see changed to significantly reduce the number of fentanyl-related deaths, which are poisonings to our children, especially among the young?
Thanks, Mickey. So there are some tactical things we can do to solve this. Number 1, we can make possession of any amount of fentanyl a felony, and you should go to jail for a very, very long time. And they're going to say, what if they're dealing with addiction? What if they didn't, intentionally mean to hurt anybody? Then they go to jail and they get the help they need, and eventually they can prove that they deserve another chance, but it's not vice versa. Number 2, we need to cancel our status as a sanctuary state. Polis agreed he would never do that in the debates with Walker, and he did it very quickly after he became governor. And here's what that means on the ground. It means that ICE agents and law enforcement cannot coordinate. They watch fentanyl loads drive right by. There's nothing they can do. And then they put somebody in jail and they're out within hours. This catch and release mentality that our governor and our leadership has. It's horrible. That's why we have the 4th highest recidivism rate in the country. That means repeat offenders. That means people who've offended, broken the law, are doing it over and over and over again. It also means educating our kids on the dangers of fentanyl. One pill can kill. The kids don't know this. They don't know. They're kids. They're trying an Adderall. They're trying a Xanax. I mean, we were all young at one point. You experiment. That's what you do as a kid. Our kids can't afford to experiment anymore. They cannot afford to experiment anymore, but we have to teach them that. No one is talking about it in the media or in our leadership. And then finally, we've got to give law enforcement the tools and resources they need to do their job. And this nonsense that my income tax law is going to defund law enforcement, don't you dare believe that baloney. There is nothing more important than funding our law enforcement right now and getting our streets clean and giving our kids a chance to be a kid and not have to worry about dying. Fentanyl is destroying our communities, and I had somebody comment on a social media thread, "You're talking about fentanyl too much. People just aren't that interested." I'm like, well, too bad. I don't care. Like, I am going to speak for all the parents who've lost their kids, whose kids are frightened to go to school, who may not have a chance because someone doesn't want to have a spine to protect our schools, or someone doesn't want to have a spine to stand up and say fentanyl is wrong, and we're going to make it a felony, and we're going to prosecute the crap out of anyone who does anything with it. That's how we're going to solve the problem. Thank you.
So I had the opportunity to talk to an ICE agent, and what he told me was that no one's smuggling people anymore. So all they're doing now is smuggling drugs. So the I-25 corridor and the I-70 corridor has become an open market for drugs. So every one shipment they catch, if they catch 50,000 pills, that's 150,000 pills they don't catch, right? So my question is this: how many people have to die? Tell me, Governor Polis, how many people have to die? Is it 1,000? Is it 2,000? Is it 10,000? What's the number of people have to die in order for us to say, okay, enough is enough? You give me that number, and then when we reach that number, then maybe we'll do something. But to remain silent on something that's killing so many of our citizens, if someone told you that the number of people killed every year in this country from fentanyl poisoning is twice that of what died in Vietnam, you would be up in arms. So where's the protest? Where's the outrage? The news just skipped right over the number like it's nothing. These are real people that are being affected. And before you say it's just drug addicts, no, it's not. These are kids. These are babies who are dying from this. So I'll just ask the governor, what's the number? Give us a number of people that have to die before it's important enough for us to do something about it. Because saying nothing and doing nothing is not the answer. We need change. And this is why Heidi Ganal and I are running. We need change because no one's going to fight for you. We're going to fight for you.
Let's transition to the emotional well-being of our students. Colorado administers a Healthy Kids survey that some people think asks highly inappropriate age-level questions, and many school districts are investing in social-emotional specialists and curriculum, which some people say are indoctrinating our children. Right here in Jeffco, many schools are using a social-emotional assessment, which makes many parents nervous. And we have already spoken about the state of emergency declared by Children's Hospital because of the skyrocketing emotional needs of our children. So Danny, we'll start with you. And how would you, as Lieutenant Governor, suggest schools address the emotional hardships our students have experienced?
So I think first and foremost, we have to return our students to the parents. I learned about my culture. I learned about who I was from my parents. School didn't teach me that. The school taught me how to read, how to write, and every once in a while how to get along with others, right? I was a hard kid. And that's what our schools should do. And I would be open to the schools doing additional things if they were doing the basic things well. But they're not doing the basic things well. And there's a capacity issue because there's only so much capacity in a day. And if you spend your day teaching social issues, then you're not teaching our kids how to read and write. We're making our kids victims. So I say let's return to the basics. And then if parents want their kids to learn things that are outside the basics, fine. Give them internet classes. You can do it at home with your parents, but you don't get credit for it. You don't get graded for it. The emotional well-being of our kids is important. And I like to tell people, you know, I didn't figure out this thing called life until I was 30. So to take a child and start confusing a child about who they are is creating that emotional damage that they can't undo. And that's why our kids are in crisis. So first and foremost, we have to stop it. Let our kids be kids. Let them grow up. Let them figure out for themselves what they want to do. Let them talk to their parents about it. That's what we need to do. And then let's do the basics first. And that's what I would do as Lieutenant Governor, is make sure that our schools are doing the basic first and that parents have a role in making sure that kids understand their social well-being.
Thanks. So guys, this is actually why I'm sitting here, why I'm running. Because my kids were in school up at Superior Elementary in Boulder Valley School District. My twins came home from first grade, and my Holly was in third or fourth grade, and asked me what a sex change operation was. And I haven't told this story often, and the reporters, if they want to reach her, they can Google and figure out what happened. It's been written about in the Federalist, Washington Examiner, etc. And believe me, this is not anti-trans, it's not anti-LGBTQ. I have dear friends that are both. This is about inappropriate things happening in the classroom, discussions happening in the classroom that belong to parents. Parents get to decide when we talk to our kids about sex. Parents get to decide, you know, about values and what happens with those discussions. And honestly, the most disturbing part of that whole thing that happened was learning that the program that teachers went through to teach this stuff in class had taught them how to deal with problematic parents. Who do you think the problematic parents were? So 30 of us parents went to the principal and said, why didn't you let us opt out of this stuff? Like, it's an anti-bullying program. I said, well, we have good anti-bullying practices, and of course we don't support any bullying, but why didn't you tell us this? Well, you can't opt out of this. It's so embedded in the curriculum. It's everywhere. And I thought, oh my goodness. So all of us families got together and decided to try and start a charter school right in Jared Polis's backyard in Superior, where he lives in Boulder, and his kids go to a private school. And there weren't a lot of options, there still aren't, in Boulder for charter schools. All of them have huge waiting lists. So we got together, tried to open an Ascent Classical. We got 700 kids signed up over 18 months, went to the board, and we got turned down. We didn't just get turned down, we got shouted out of town, because they didn't want our kind there as problematic parents, right? And that's why we ended up moving our kids and moving out of Boulder Valley into Douglas County. And my kids now are in a place where they're thriving because I was able to move to a different zip code. I was able to have a choice about where they went to school. I want every parent in Colorado to be able to do that same thing. It's not fair to our kids to lock them in because of where they're born or the school that they're assigned. That goes back to that first conversation we had. Nothing is more important than choice, transparency, and competition to fix our schools.
An issue close to the hearts of those in the Jeffco Kids First community: school shutdowns and the role of public health. In Jeffco, our children in public schools spent the better part of 2 years learning online, wearing masks if they were in classrooms, and even being denied the ability to participate in extracurricular activities, despite what we heard at the debate. For the most part, our current governor allowed retail businesses and pot shops to reopen and abdicated responsibility, keeping schools closed, and supported local unelected public health officials who shut down our schools. Nora, a freshman, is here to ask our next question.
It was hard knowing our school leaders were not making enough changes for us during the pandemic. Jeffco Kids First successfully pushed back on public health orders and forced change at the top level of Jefferson County Public Health. Did local and state public health departments have too much power? And what would you do to roll back their influence?
Heidi first.
Thanks, Nora. I am so glad you're doing well. A lot of kids aren't. A lot of kids that were shut down out of sports, their schools were shut down, they weren't able to hang out with their friends, go to the mall. Why on earth are we not trusting parents to make these decisions? Parents know better than anybody how to protect their kids. No one wants to protect their kids more than parents. Unelected bureaucrats, I know their heart might be in the right place. They don't know what's best for our own children. We should decide that. And when parents stood up in Jefferson County, it's part of why I reached out to help, because I'm like, these parents are saying, if you support local control, we are the local control. We're telling you we want our kids in school, and trust us to decide what's best for them. If our kids want to go to school with masks, great, then they should. If they want to get a vaccination, if the parents want them to, great, then they should. If they don't, they should not. He talks about choice in healthcare. Where was the choice in healthcare for 2 years? He kept schools and sports and churches shut down, and he kept pot shops open. And no one will talk about it in the media. No one will talk about it outside of those of us that are trying to get our message out there, that there are other ways to deal with things like that, with crises like that. And it goes back to trusting the people of Colorado to make good decisions for their lives, their businesses, their families, their children. Their children. Parents need their power back. They need to be first in line. Thank you.
So that was a great question, and I'll just answer it. Yeah, they had too much power. The health department, their role is to inform us. The government role is to inform us. Once we're informed about what the danger is, we can do our own assessment of ourselves and our family and those around us, and then say, these are the steps we're going to take. I have in-laws that are in their 80s. So when I was informed about the virus, I said, okay, we're going to lock you guys away. We're going to bring you food. We're going to make sure you're safe. But I didn't lock myself away because I'm a healthy male. I didn't lock my wife away. I didn't shut down my business. We informed the people in the business of what the virus was doing, and then we allowed everyone to make their own decision. And we went through that process, and not a single outbreak happened. For our kids, I will say this. I will never forgive them for masking our kids, because the harm that's been done to our kids is generational. It's generational. For adults, we get to make choices. We can decide whether or not. But for our kids to mandate that, it took away their development. It scarred them for life. And even today, you will see kids who are afraid of other kids now. That is no way to live a life of fear. And so I would say they do. They had too much power, and their job was to inform us, not to regulate us.
Yeah. Hey, Lindsay. And just so you know, they still have power. We are one of a handful of states that are still under an emergency executive order by Jared Polis.
And a little more on transparency and parents' rights, a current top issue. In 2022, Democrats in our state legislature had the opportunity to support a Parents' Bill of Rights, giving parents an opportunity to know what is being taught in classrooms. That was defeated, and a bill to require teaching material to be posted was also defeated. Grace, a Jeffco senior, has written our next question.
So these past few years, I've experienced a noticeable uptick in political opinions being expressed in my classrooms, not only in my high school, but in my sister's middle school as well. Some things my teachers have said, they have lectured extensively about wearing masks even after restrictions were lifted, required us to state our pronouns, encouraged us to explore our sexuality, described socialism as a, quote, great form of government, and told us their opinions on specific political candidates and bills. What would you do as government to encourage, or as governor, to encourage transparency and objectivity in the classroom, as well as guaranteeing parents' rights in education?
Mika? So as a regent at the University of Colorado for the last 6 years, I've dealt with your next stage of life. After you go to college, what's going to happen? And what happened over the last 6 years is a tragedy. We are there to teach kids how to think, not what to think. And I have spent most of my time as a regent, which I'm proud to do, defending kids from being shouted down, shut down, told that they don't have an opinion, and not just conservative kids, kids that are liberal, kids that are libertarian, you name it. They are all scared to death to state their opinion, so much so that I tried to get the debate club going again at CU my first couple years. I had pizza parties, I had ads all over the place. I said, just come. We'd get a handful of kids, but they were terrified that they would be videotaped or somebody would narc on them, especially if they were saying the opposite thing like you do in debate club. And so we never got it off the ground, so I ended up starting the Free to Be Coalition to model debate for them, and we brought some really cool debates to campus to try and get them to see what it looks like to have feisty, collaborative debate. And now, this is happening even farther down the line in our K-12 schools. In fact, one of my dear friends had me talk to her daughter, who is a junior in high school, and she is a conservative kid, and said something about that she didn't agree with the teacher, and he looked at her and he goes, "Oh, you're one of those." And then she was labeled, right, at Arapahoe High School. And so this is happening all over. Don't let them tell you it's not. It is. And the way we're going to fix it is by more free speech, more saying things that are uncomfortable, more encouraging our kids to dip their toe in the water of debate and learning how to push back. That's what I'm trying to teach my kids. That's what I want to teach all kids. And I am going to absolutely respect anyone who has a different opinion as a leader. My friends are Democrats. Some of my best friends are Democrats. Some of my best friends are Republican. And I love them all. And the way we get to the best solutions in society is by arguing in a nice way and kind of tugging back and forth, and then you meet in the middle and you come up with the best solution. And that's going to happen under our governorship, lieutenant governorship. Danny and I do this too. We argue a little bit. Oh, no, this is better. No, that. It's good. It's healthy. We got to teach our kids that again.
I would just say this. It's important to be able to ask the question. So why are they afraid of the answer? We should be able to ask the question. In fact, it's foundational to our Constitution that we ask the question. Because those limited powers that were given to government are very, very well enumerated. But in the 10th Amendment, it says one thing, that all powers not enumerated belongs to the state and to the people. And so if the people can't ask questions, if you can't ask questions, then who is to keep government aligned to the values of the people they serve? And remember, they're servants. That's what they are. And we should not be afraid of the question. We should be afraid when we can't ask the question. And that is a society that, to me, is not a society worth living in if we have to live in fear of asking the question. So I would encourage you, all of the young people in here, continue to ask the question. Make them accountable to what the answer is. And then make them back that answer up. Right? Because that's how we learn, that's how we grow, that's how our society gets stronger. And so we will make sure that, first and foremost, that freedom of speech is happening on our campuses no matter where you're at. We will make sure that transparency is happening on our campuses no matter where you're at. And I always say that if you can't read it in public, then you probably shouldn't be teaching it.
Heidi, you often say fund the student, not the system. Can you explain what that means? And then Danny will add his thoughts as well.
Sure. If you guys have seen what's happened in Arizona and Florida and some other states, I believe Tennessee, Kentucky, the way they're improving their school systems is by choice, transparency, and competition. But if you tell a young mother who has 2 jobs and is struggling to get by that she has choice, she can go to put her child in a private school or homeschool, she doesn't have the resources to do that. She needs access to those dollars. So every child is kind of, has, like, think of it as a backpack of dollars that are attached to them in Colorado through the system. And those dollars should be able to go anywhere that the family wants to. We should trust the families. There should be no strings attached. We should trust the families to do what's best for their children. As Danny said, all of our kids learn differently, and we may have 4 different kids that go to 4 different schools or homeschool, etc. But it is time to do better for our kids, and parents have to be the lead on that, so the money will follow. So if you are in a school, you're not comfortable with what's happening in the classroom, or your kids aren't learning to read or write, you can pick a different choice, and you can have the dollars to do that. Does it make sense? Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah. So I mentioned to you that 22,000 students left the public system, right? Well, those parents are still paying taxes. So that $14,000 or so a kid, not only are they paying that to the school that no longer exists, so we have fewer students, more administrators, higher costs. If I ran a business that way, I wouldn't be in business very long. And so to the point, I agree with Heidi. We have to fund the family to make sure the families have a choice, because here's who's being affected by this. When you look at Denver public school system and you say only 5% of black and brown kids can read at grade level, grade 3, 5%. That is shameful. Those parents don't have a choice to move their kids to a place where they can learn. And what we're doing is we're leaving 1/3 of our population behind. 1/3. We can ill afford to do that. We have to do better. What are they afraid of? Why not give parents that choice? Why not fund the families? And that's why I support the plan by Heidi Ganal, to make sure that families are funded and not schools.
Thank you.
Over the last couple of decades, we have eliminated trades programs in many public schools. What would you do to expand trade opportunities in schools so students have multiple paths to success?
You know, I was in shop class in 8th grade when I wrote the business plan for Camp Bow Wow, kind of. I was with my dear friend Trace, who actually started Voodoo Donuts. And we were in shop class, and we were making up things, like we were writing up all these ideas. I remember thinking back, actually, we didn't create Camp Bow Wow back then, but I had some idea. But he actually did have Voodoo Donuts, I think, then, that idea. But, you know, our kids need to learn how to make it out in the world, and they need to find their passion. And not every child needs to go to a 4-year school. Now it takes about 6 years to graduate, actually, and spend $100,000 in order to maybe figure out what they want to do along the way. So what we can do better is provide better opportunities to find their passions in K through 12. And you give them opportunities like Couragean, which is an organization here in Denver that shows videos and lets them see what it's like to do different jobs, and the jobs are actually jobs that we need here in Colorado. Not all of them require a 4-year degree, but you have to mentor and model to kids what they might want to do and find their interests, find their love, find their passion. Help them connect the dots. But we can do it a lot earlier, and then we can encourage them, take away that stigma that they have to go to 4-year college. I mean, that's already happening. Our enrollment is dropping pretty dramatically around the country. Parents are like, hey, I'm not going to invest $100,000 into maybe. Now, if you want to be an engineer, a doctor, et cetera, yeah, that makes sense. But man, welders make really good money right now. We need construction workers, we need teachers, we need mental health workers. I mean, all across the board. And then we've got to make it easier for people to get certifications and accreditations in certain careers. So if I'm a teacher and I want to maybe do mental health care in the school also, right now you have to jump through all kinds of hoops. Let's provide some training and give them accreditation and let them do it. If I'm an entrepreneur, I was in Monarch High School, Tori was in Monarch, and I wanted to teach entrepreneurship there on the side when I was running Camp Bow Wow. I couldn't, I didn't have the right accreditation. I was like, what? I built this big company. Anyway, we've got to make it easier for people to teach, for people to mentor, for people to give kids hope, and we've also got to make it less stigma to not go to four-year college and to make it cool again to do the trades. So.
Yeah, that's great. So my experience with shop was a little different. So when I went to electrical shop, I fried the board. When I went to wood shop, I threw a wood plank across the room. When I was in mechanic, I didn't want to get my hands dirty. So I quickly realized that I had no skills, so I'd better get an education, right? Heidi is absolutely right, and I'm fortunate enough to be a part of the business community. And what I hear from the business community is that they want this. So this doesn't even have to be funded by the schools, because construction sites, they want to train people in apprenticeship. Electricians want to train people in apprenticeships. HVAC wants to do the same thing. My brother lives down in Texas, and one of the things that's in Texas is Lockheed Martin builds all the F-35s there. And they're desperately in need of people who can weld, and so they bring them in to train them. And these welders come out and they're apprentices, and they're making $90,000 a year. That is great money. And we should not tell our kids that they can't work and get their hands dirty, because someone has to build the society we live in. Someone has to maintain the society. And if you live in a place where I live, like my home, it's always breaking. And I tell my wife, I'm not that guy. So, right? And so we need those trades, because it's important for a person's self-esteem to know, right? Our high schools used to prepare kids for life. When you got out of high school, you had the skills to be ready for life, and we're not doing that anymore. We have to return to that. If we have any hopes of saving the future, we have to return to that, and trades are a key component of that.
Two remaining questions. In Colorado, transportation is provided at the discretion of the district, and many districts charge to be able to ride a bus, and the distance to school in which transportation is provided varies. Would you support a law to require districts to provide transportations to students not attending their district-bounded school? And how would you suggest supporting parents who want their children to attend a school outside their boundaries?
That's part of going all in on school choice. I mean, we can figure that out as a community, too. It doesn't mean necessarily we need more money, but we can provide other innovative, cool ways to do it. There's a car service, kind of like an Uber for kids, where they're vetted and they're well-trained, and they take good care of the kids. I mean, there's lots of neat things happening around the country that we can bring here, but do not deny a child choice in schools because of transportation. That's just silly. There are so many ways to solve that problem, and not even necessarily the government or more dollars, but I'm excited to tackle that.
Yeah, and I haven't talked to Heidi about this, but I travel along the highway all the time, and I look at the train that passes me with no one in it. And I look at the buses that pass me with no one in it, and I think, wow, I've been to New York City. I see how kids get to school. They get on a train, right? They get on the public transportation to get there. So why not use that here? We have great public transportation here, so why not use it? So that's one. Number two, I'm not a fan of being trapped by your zip code. We should not allow a system to be set up to trap kids by their zip codes and not allow them to be the best that they can be. And so whatever plan that allows them to be free, because I'm a freedom guy, and I want freedom for everyone, and I want freedom for our kids, and I want freedom for parents. And so whatever we can do to enable that freedom, that's what I will support and work very hard. And I've asked Heidi to give me the tough jobs, right? Give me those hard jobs, and I'll go get them done.
I'd like to move from education specific for the last question, crime, which affects our children greatly. We are here in Arvada this evening, and just in this community, we have lost 2 law enforcement officers in the last year or so, and crime is skyrocketing. What plans do you have to rein in the skyrocketing crime rates and to increase support for law enforcement?
So first, we're going to replace the parole board, as many as we can. We're going to replace the leaders at Department of Corrections, Public Safety, and Justice. We're going to put judges in place that are not activists, but actually support law and order in their job as judges. We're going to do truth in sentencing. So if someone gets sentenced to 110 years for killing 4 people in a fiery truck crash, we don't reduce it to 10 years and kind of look the other way from the justice process. We're going to criminalize fentanyl. We're going to stop our status as a sanctuary state. We're going to give law enforcement the resources and tools they need to recruit and retain, which qualified immunity is a part of that. There are ways we can do better on that front. And we're going to make sure every school is protected with school resource officers, with volunteers, with whatever technology we need to make that happen. That will be one of the highest priorities. And one of the things I learned out of that school safety committee is parents want transparency, they want accountability, they want to know we're actually working to move the needle on this. So once a month, I'm going to do a press conference, and Danny and I are going to talk about the progress we're making on school safety. The other thing we're going to do is create a dashboard so you can keep a hold of us and hold us accountable for moving the needle. The other thing we're going to do is create a school safety SWAT team, which I have a feeling I know who might be on there. And we're going to make sure that we are always ahead of the issues. We're not waiting to react. We're going to be proactive at keeping our kids safe, keeping fentanyl out of schools, and keeping our kids healthy and happy.
So the crime issue in this state is kind of a slow boil, right? It happened very slowly, while we were out trying to take care of ourselves and feed our families and make sure that we were safe. But our state now, there's only 3 states that have worse crime, total crime, than Colorado does. That's something we can't tolerate. What does crime do to us? We know the $29 billion price tag that it costs every citizen every year. But what we don't know is, why is it so bad? Well, I'll tell you why. Because there's been purposeful legislation that's been passed. So in our state, the same handful of criminals are committing 90% of all the crimes. They commit the crimes, they get out because we can't hold them on bond. They commit the crimes, they get out, and then eventually they kill someone. And then we hold them. We need laws to restore balance. When the law was passed, it doesn't allow us to hold criminals on bail. The shameful law that says when someone is arrested, they have to be out of jail in 6 hours. Police officers can't even do the paperwork in 6 hours. We're all about criminal justice reform, but real reform, because there are just some criminals that are out there. Their intent is to do bad. And I'll just say it, they don't deserve to be among us. And we need to be protected, and we need to empower law enforcement to do that. We have to. So one of the things that we talked about, let's roll back all the laws that have made us less safe. Let's win the Senate so we can have some help doing that, right? Okay. I want to tell you guys the most important thing to any community, regardless of where you live, is your safety. And a poor community doesn't have to be a bad community. And right now, we're all unsafe. It doesn't matter if you live in Mount View or you live in Highlands Ranch. We're all unsafe. And that has to change, and that will change under the Gunal governorship. I assure you of that.
As we close out this evening, we're going to ask both Danny and Heidi to take 2 minutes and share their final thoughts. And let's start with Danny and end with Heidi.
Yeah, thank you. So this election year, everyone says, it's the most important election year ever, right? I really believe this is it. And there's a lot of issues out there. There's a ton of issues that people can focus on. And I know that you hear in the press, they talk about things that really matter to some and don't matter to others. But let me just say this. If the safety of your kids is important to you, then you have to vote for Heidi Gunal. If the welfare of your family is important to you, then you have to vote for Heidi Gunal. If your kid's future is important to you, then you have to vote for Heidi Gunal. There's no simpler way to put that. We're not going to always agree on 100% of everything. But what we do agree on is that we should live in safe communities, that our kids should be educated, that we should be able to afford to live in a place that we call home. And if those 3 things are important to you, I'm asking you to tell your friends, you have to support Heidi Ganal, because we know 4 years ago, things were great in this state. And 4 years later, things are not great. And Jared Polis owns responsibility for that. So no matter what he tells you about the money he's saving you while he's taking money out of one pocket, right? No matter what he tells you about he's making this top 10 safest place to live, the facts just don't back him up. And this election is about that. All the other things are important, and we'll get to those things. But those are the three most important things to all of us, and that's something we can be united around. And so I'll ask you to give your support and your vote to Heidi Ganal for governor.
You know, and Danny, you've been such an incredible partner in this. We've known each other probably, 10 years on some other boards together. And I knew Danny was the right pick because we both have such a heart for kids. Like, I knew that he would agree with me that that has to be our number one priority. That if our kids and our grandkids are not okay, nothing is okay. I get, like Danny said, there are a lot of issues going on. But if we don't start with our children, then nothing else matters. And I am not going to go down without a fight. I am going to do everything I can to shed sunshine on all these things that the governor doesn't want you to know about what's happening with our children. Guys, we've got to wake up. You've got to wake up your neighbors, your friends. Tell them how dangerous it is in Colorado to be a child right now. Tell them to turn off the TV, turn off social media, and just look around. Ask their kids how they're doing. Ask their kids what's happening in their classrooms. The last 24 hours, I've gotten hammered because I spoke up for kids and parents about something that was uncomfortable for the media to cover. I don't care. I'm going to tell the truth. I will always tell you the truth. I'm just a kid from Monument, Colorado, who got lucky and had a lot of tenacity and built a business that I loved. I got to live the American dream. And now it is my duty, it is our duty, because Danny got to too, to protect that for our kids and our grandkids. It is that simple. That's why we're running. We don't have aspirations to do anything else. We've both done what we wanted to business-wise. We have nothing to lose. They can't hurt us. They can't say anything that'll destroy our careers. It's just because we love our kids. And we can't stand what's happening to our state. We will not tolerate it. We will hold Jared Polis and the other folks accountable for what they're doing, and we will be the voice for Mickey and John and Maria and all of those parents who have been so hurt by the policies that are destroying our state. We have 36 days to go. 36 days to head this state in a different direction. Volunteer, sign up, door knock. Calls. We have an app you can download. It's so easy. You can do it from the couch. The kids can get involved. We're going to have honkin' waves, more rallies, more town halls. There are so many ways you can get engaged, as little or as much as you want, but it is go time, guys. It's go time for our kids and our grandkids, and we're not going to go down without a fight. So thank you.
I again want to thank Heidi Ganal and Danny Moore for participating this evening and for stepping up to run. I also want to say a personal thank you to Heidi. In 2020, when schools closed and we started to understand the harm our children were going to suffer, Heidi is one of the first and most consistent voices to advocate for our children. She was personally very supportive of us and the entire Jeffco Kids First community. When Heidi met me at a coffee shop, I had my newborn son with me. The coffee shop closed earlier than expected. I thought maybe it would end right there. Heidi packed up my baby, carried him out, and we finished the conversation in her car. And as I fed my little guy in her backseat, I thought to myself, his next baby book entry is drooled on Governor Ganal's shoulder and was fed in the backseat of her car. If that's not a mom on a mission, I don't know what is. Heidi is on a proven mission to heal our children and ensure they are first, always, and there's no doubt about it. Now to end with wise words from Winston Churchill. Make for the children an evening of happiness in a world of storm. Let the children have their night of fun and laughter. Resolved that by our daring, these same children shall not be denied their right to live in a free and decent world. I want to remind everyone who came tonight that your ballots will be in your mailboxes in just a few weeks. I believe October 17th. It is up to us to ensure that you and all of your family, friends, and neighbors vote and know for whom you will vote and why. Please be sure to stay and ask Heidi and Danny any additional questions you may have. And thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful evening. I do quickly have Matt from Campfire, Colorado, who is going to say a word.